Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Dr. Glenn Vo. I'm super excited to be here at MB2 HQ, actually the new building, with Jake, one of the execs. He's super knowledgeable when it comes to, EBITDA, all those terms that when you're thinking about possibly partnering with an MB2 or maybe other organization, he's got all that information. Now, Jake, last time I was here, this building didn't exist.
That's right.
Obviously I have a cool video guy, Derek. Shout out to Derek. Before, it was just like a little tripod. I mean, I leveled up, but honestly, MB2 has leveled up as well. And when I was here, I was office 200. Now, I know the stats are always changing, but today, how many partners do we have now?
639 offices today, over 600 partners, over 1,300 doctors.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so for those who, when I joined MB2 and people are like, okay, Glenn, I want to see what happens to you. Guys, I was office 200, and now we're at 639, I think the updated number. Safe to say that things are going pretty good over here.
Yeah. Been a busy few years, busy since you joined, but it's been good. It's a hard environment. There's been a lot of change in the industry, but thanks to our partners, it's been a good run.
Well, so the reason I wanted to bring you on is because there's other groups out there. There's also a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation. So look, we're gonna start off with the big thing is people are talking about recapitalization, right? They're like, oh, I heard this group is recapping. You guys are recapping. Before we even dive into that, what's going on with MB2, what's going on in the industry, can you give us like a little lesson here? And guys, I want to let you know, if you want to learn more about, EBITDA, all these business things, Jake is the man. He does all this amazing content over at MB2. Go check out his videos. But since we have him here, I'm going to ask him to kind of educate us as well. So recapitalization, what is that? What does that mean? What does that mean for organizations and for doctors who are thinking about partnering?
Yeah.
What do they need to know about that?
Yeah. The easiest way to think about a recapitalization, the way I like to think of it, if you've refinanced a mortgage on a house, you've recapitalized. So a recapitalization is simply a way for a company to recapitalize its balance sheet, the capital that backs the business, both the equity and the debt.
Is it kind of like refinancing your student loans?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. Anytime you're refinancing and you have the opportunity to change the capital structure or take cash out of an asset, that's basically what a recapitalization is. The way it gets talked about in the DSO space, because most DSOs are backed by private equity, is it's a liquidity event for investors to get a return on their investment.
So the group that invested originally, or is the current investor, that's their opportunity to get their investment back.
Okay. That's right. And the primary investor in most DSOs is a private equity fund, but as is the case with most DSOs, doctors are also invested. So the investors who are participating in a recapitalization are both private equity investors and doctors. So they are on the seller side of that recapitalization, and they are looking to sell their equity to an incoming investor that is hopefully, if done correctly, going to buy the company at a higher valuation than the current investors bought in at.
So I want to stop you right there, because this is something that this is where the misinformation starts, and this is where people get worried. That's where the people who they tell me, Glenn, why did you partner with the MB2?
Yeah.
They're backed by PE, and they're literally going to tell you what to do. So first of all, we have to just like dispel that myth. Now, look, we can't talk for other DSOs. Right. We can talk about MB2 because that's part of the core culture. So, Jake, when you talk about all those things and doctors are getting scared, like what, PE group, investing, selling to someone else, explain to everyone at MB2, when that happened, when it has happened in the past, did a bunch of guys in suits come marching into? First of all, they didn't march in my office and tell me what to do, but just let everyone. Do a bunch of people in suits start going around and just changing things? They're like ripping down everyone's like pictures and everything. Yeah. Explain to them how things are done here.
Yeah. So MB2 recapitalized for the very first time in October 2017. We recapitalized again in January 2021. So we've done this twice now behind two very different investors. Both occasions, those private equity sponsors were looking to put capital behind our company, a proven management team, a proven base of partners, a model they felt worked, so they could grow their capital and again have that successful exit on a recapitalization. They weren't here to try to interject their opinion in how to run a dental group. In fact, I think most investors you talk to, the two that we've worked with especially, would tell you they're not operators. They're not here to try to operate a company. They're looking to back a model and a leadership team and doctors that they can believe in. So they're not really here to be activist investors. There are a subset of private equity funds where that is their strategy.
Yeah.
But they are looking to invest into struggling companies that have issues and insert very specific management expertise to turn the company around. By and large, most private equity funds are looking to put growth capital to work and let the company do what it does best.
So I want to piggyback on what you just said, and just to let you guys know, if you're curious who our current partner is, Charles Bank. I had Brandon White, who is kind of the guy that works with us over there. There's videos on YouTube. I can share that in the comments as well. Watch it. You can understand their level of interaction. But I think what you just said is really important. And that is, look, there's different DSOs, just like there's different type of practice models, there's different types of partners.
Right.
And we have trust, as one of the MB2 owners, there's many of us, we trust you guys to make sure you guys pick the right partner, right? And it just explain to everyone why that's so important, because you just said it yourself. There's some groups that, hey, we like what you're doing. Here's some more capital, grow. We want to get a return on investment. We won't do anything. And then you said there's literally some groups that are like, we want to come in there and start kicking butt and taking names type of thing.
Right.
Explain that process when you guys go through and choose the right partner to grow MB2.
Yeah, so I think the way we go about it is very similar to a way a dentist would think about picking a DSO as a partner. It's very, very similar. And as most people know, as you know, Dr. V is the CEO of MB2. He's the founder.
He's a dentist.
He's a dentist, one of the primary shareholders. And so his decision-making in selecting a new investor has always been centered around what is best for our company in the long term. So we're trying to avoid short-term thinking, meaning investors who are coming in to try to think of what's going to be best for 3 years, because then they're going to be out.
Yeah.
We're taking a much longer view of the business. And then what's going to be best for the doctor partners too. This is obviously an alternative model to most traditional corporate dentistry. And so it's important that when we pick our partners, they see that same vision and have the, desire and commitment to basically stay out of our way. We feel like we've earned that right to some extent through our performance, through the model. I think the doctors within our group, as you know, have all always stepped up to help the group. They've always done well to help each other, at the individual level. And so preserving that culture is incredibly important. Most of the investors we're talking to are very well capitalized. They all have a lot of money. It's not a question of do they have the capital to support. The question is, do they see the same 5-year vision and do they understand and respect that they're here for a period of time? MB2 and the doctor base is going to be here well beyond that.
So I'm glad you said that, because again, just on social media and whatnot, and people who reach out to me, they're like, okay, I've heard rumors that MB2 is going to recap. What's going on? And for those who've been wondering, for those who've been, and you know who you are, who've been pestering me, because I'm like, hey, look, I trust the execs. I let them do. There's a reason why they're in that position. We worry about what we do. We trust in what they do. We trust in what Dr. V decides. The thing is that's the answer right there. Why is it taking so long to recap? Because MB2, we don't just decide, hey, the first offer, I'm just going to go. Talk about, again, why you guys are so careful about finding the right partner, as opposed to you're just looking for the first offer that kind of comes across the table.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think there's a couple components to it. First, let's look at the financial side, the economics, which is, I think, where most doctors' heads go to first, right? In a recapitalization, all of us, Dr. V, you, me, all the partners, we have to think of that transaction not just as a seller, not just what are we getting out of it economically, but we're also reinvesting back into the company.
Yeah.
And so we want that deal structure to be good on both sides of the transaction. if the company was overvalued, we might high five in the short term, right? And think, oh, this is awesome. What a great outcome.
Yeah.
But we're also buying back into that overvalued company. And you wouldn't do that in your normal day-to-day investing, nor would I, nor would probably any of your audience. So it's very important in the deal structure itself and in the valuation that we're looking at it as a way to not just make money today, but in 3 years and then another 3 years, and to keep that string of success going. So it's very important to think of this both as a seller and a buyer.
I want to disclose something as well. A lot of people have asked me, like, why did I want to partner with MB2? Well, I'll tell you, number one, it's the people, it's the leadership, it's people like Jake that are working on all the owner doctors' behalf. It's Dr. V, who is a dentist as well, who understands, of course, the autonomy portion about it. We'll discuss that in a little bit more. But the track record, right? So again, I'm Office 200, right? Office 600, and I mean over 600. But again, I've gone through a recap myself. So I didn't go through the first one. I came on later. I went through that second recap with Charles Bank, and of course, I was worried. I was like, "Take us, a bunch of people are going to walk in there and start ripping down stuff and tell me what to do." And I can tell you guys that hasn't happened. Yeah. And again, with MB2 right now, without getting into specifics, and I want to point something out here. If we wanted to recap sooner,
yes,
is it safe to say, is it truthful to say that we could have already recapped if we wanted to?
We could have, yes.
We could have.
Okay.
But the reason why not, what is the reason why we haven't recapped yet?
Well, I think there's two reasons. Again, we were touching on the economic side of it. Mm-hmm. The other side of it is picking the right partner. Yeah. Someone that, you feel like you can live with for the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. Something we always encourage dentists to think about. Don't just pick a DSO based on the transaction.
If you're going to go with MB2, make sure that you want to be a part of MB2 for a long period of time, which I am. Again, it's not something that you guys need to understand. When you join an MB2 or whatever organization, I mean, obviously do your due diligence, but you're not just hanging up the handpiece and just going and drinking pina coladas. What's the average age of the owners?
47.
I mean, come on, guys, right? It's not a bunch of, people are ready to mail it in. We want to keep growing, want to grow with MB2. So back to that question again, we could have, but I think what Jake said, we've earned the right to be picky.
We've earned a right to be picky. We're not for sale. We're here to pick the right financial partner that's going to benefit all of us long term. Dr. V has always stayed very engaged with the market. We meet with all the large investment bankers regularly. We meet with the large cap private equity funds. Those conversations have always been ongoing. So it's less about, what's the right time. It's picking the right partner and when does it make the most sense for our own doctor partners. And we can track the value of the company with pretty reasonable accuracy. So understanding when we can optimize the return for our doctors is a key component of it, but also the timing of bringing on the next investor to help propel us into the next, phase of our company's timeline. Because as you pointed to on the beginning, leveling up, this is a vastly different company in terms of sophistication, resources, everything than it was when you joined. Oh, yeah. And it will be that way, 5 years from now too.
And, so I'm glad you pointed all those things out because when people ask, well, what's the difference between this group and this group? Well, when you're talking about recap, over here at MB2, we have choices,
right?
But let's just be truthful. You know the market really well. All the other groups. We're not going to mention anyone by name, right? We probably could, but we're not going to mention anyone by name. But do all other groups have the same luxury that MB2 has, where they can say, you know what, I'll look for the next partner. I can be picky there. Other groups, can they be just as picky? No. And let's just be honest, because every group is different, and every group only gets certain deals based on their track record. But for the doctors who are thinking like, well, I heard so and so is going to recap. Well, that might or might not be true, and explain why that might or might not be true.
Yeah, so I think most groups are, there's been a huge boom in the DSO space over the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, the number of DSOs that exist today tremendously more than when I started 7 years ago, right? And so those groups are backed by capital. They had a different inception than MB2, obviously started by Dr. V and a few doctors and grew very organically for 10 years. So it is a founder-led, dentist-led business. So we have a different set of decision-making criteria and long-term goals than most companies that were backed by private equity right out of the gates. Yeah. So most groups, most of the doctors are not making the decision on the timeline, when to sell, and how to sell. That's very much just driven by the private equity investor. I think that's the first thing to understand. The other thing to understand is if a group can't perform, if a group can't sustain its performance, right? In the last few years, let's face it, have been pretty good to dentistry. Cost of capital's been at an all-time low. Everyone's been interested in selling their practice or buying a practice. So it's been a real boom period, but now you're starting to see the adverse impact of that as economic times get tougher. If a company can't sustain its performance long-term and prove that it can't sustain its performance, I mean, investors are not dumb. The next investor coming through is going to look at the track record and performance of a company and say, this isn't a company we want to invest in. So not just who's driving the decision, but the performance of the company impacts the decision and timing on when to sell, but also the factors that make up the company, the equity alignment model with the doctors, the geographic location, the specialty type or the multi-specialty type. You mentioned age of the doctors. I mean, there's a lot of risk factors that go into a dental business. As you know, running a dental practice is really hard. Doing that at scale is even harder. So companies have to have a lot of things going for it to show to an investor that this is a company worth investing in.
I mean, I love that information right there, because for those who are thinking about, okay, maybe I want to partner up with a DSO and they're trying to figure that out. I mean, Jake just laid out what you should be looking for, because looking at it from an investor standpoint, if I was an investor and I wanted to invest in a DSO, I want to invest in a DSO that, the doctors are in alignment,
right?
The doctors are going to stick around, right? Like, who wants to invest? It's just like buying a practice and you want the staff to stay on. Right. Well, if you went there and the staff was all going to bail the second that you signed the paperwork, you're not going to want to buy the office. It's the same. It literally, as I'm listening to you, it's the same concept here. If I was investing in a DSO, I would make sure that the doctors were fairly young and they were fairly engaged and they're sticking around. They're not once we invest, they're all going to take off. So with MB2, I mean, the track record's there. So for the other groups, again, we're not going to mention any names here, the other groups that started with PE backing right off the bat, that doesn't have a way to keep the doctors engaged and aligned. If those groups cannot find someone to recap with, let's just be honest. Let's just use economics. If they can't find another partner, what ends up happening?
They're kind of stuck. Right. And
they can't grow anymore, right?
Well, yeah, that's right. If you can't recapitalize, meaning go get new capital, then you're stuck. And your choice is you kind of become a zombie company, or you have to go find an alternative form of capital. So a lot of groups will, if they go to market and they can't recapitalize, they don't find an investor, then they have to figure out, can we go raise new debt, or can we go raise preferred equity as an alternative form of capital? Usually that's just a bit of a extension on life. That's not going to propel you into the next 5 years. That's going to last you for the next 12 months. And so companies generally that think in 12-month bites don't do very well. You are forced into making very short-term day-to-day survival decisions, as opposed to long-term, what do we do to make this company thrive for the long term? Going back to the house example, I think it's such a great example that most people understand. Think about putting your house on the market.
Yeah. And no one buys it.
And no one buys it. It sits there on the market for 150 days and no one buys it. You're like, what do I do? Do I take it off the market? Do I go give a facelift to the front porch? Do I redo the kitchen? I mean, you've got to figure out what to do to fix it. But I think that's what's going to be occurring. It already has occurred and it will continue to occur because so many DSOs were created so quickly and got into the market and grew so quickly without foresight to infrastructure, leadership, longevity. The idea was kind of a quick flip. And now you've seen interest rates come up, The availability of capital is extremely constrained, and investors right now are very, very risk adverse. So they're going to be very selective and very choosy. We met with several of the big investment bankers up in New York 4 weeks ago, and one of them made a statement that I'll never forget. And the point that was made was, these partners at these private equity funds, they're putting their name on the line when they take a big company investment to their investment committee. And if that investment doesn't pan out, that's really a career ender for them.
Wow.
So you think of the stakes on the other end.
So can we say that Brandon is slightly happy?
Brandon's safe. He's doing quite well.
Again, we're talking about Brandon White with Charles Bank, and I know many of you guys have watched that video. But if you want kind of an understanding of who we work with, it's great to see that video there. But look, I want to give you guys the truth here, right? Again, the truth here, and it's simple economics. What Jake is talking about here. If you're a doctor and you're thinking about something long term, right? You're not thinking about there is models, right, where you sell and you just kind of have some golden handcuffs and you leave, right? But for doctors who want to get to another level, everything that you just said there, what are some of the things if they're talking to us over at MB2, they're talking to other groups, what are some of the questions they need to ask them? Like, can you give them a list so that they can ask them, and for the doctors who they want to invest, they want to be a part of an organization, they want to keep growing, but they don't want to be stuck in almost like this zombie company where they can't raise any more capital and they're just stuck.
Right.
What are some of the things they need to ask?
I think the first, they need to ask about the track record, not the track record of the private equity investor behind the company, the track record of the company. What are their accomplishments? Some of these groups have not been around for a long time. That's okay. It's not about what have you done over a decade. What have you done over the last 2 to 3 years for your partners? Show me tangible results that I can sink my teeth into. The second, meet the leadership team. Meet the leadership team, feel comfortable with them, and then ask them pointedly, how long are you going to be here for? One thing we think about, most dentists, the staff has been with the dentist forever, right? Yeah. In a private practice, most of the staff members are there for years.
Yeah.
And so that's just how dentists think, but that's not really how corporate America works. So I would encourage every dentist to meet with the leadership team and ask them, how long are you going to be here? I'm going to commit my practice into this partnership for the long term. Are you the specific people I'm doing this with? Third, I would ask about the vision. What is the vision of the group? Where do you intend to be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, assuming you're a dentist with that type of long-term vision? And then the last would be certainly the equity and economic alignment model. What is the ongoing financial benefit to a dentist, not just the initial transaction, but what can a dentist reasonably expect out of their equity, their practice for the next 5, 10 years?
That last part, I will tell you guys and this is me as a owner dentist in MB2, that is one of the big reasons why many of us are in alignment with the company. Yeah. We see the long-term vision. We all want to win. We celebrate whenever other practices win. We celebrate when new practices come on because the criteria is so, the standard is the standard, right? The standard is the standard. The standard here at MB2 is really high. So we know that whenever a new owner comes in, they met that standard, right? And so I think that is super big right there. Okay, Jake, so to wrap things up here, if they want to learn more, obviously, guys, I can share his cell phone, but I won't do it to this guy. But if they want to learn more, if they want to tell, it's not just you, Jake. You have an amazing team. MB2 has an amazing team. That's another thing too. If you look at the sign back here, it says power to the partners, right? And basically that's all the doctor partners. But for us as the owner doctors, we look at that as the people as well. The people that help us, like the Jakes and all the execs. We have a talented team over here. That's another thing that he didn't mention, but I'll go ahead and say that as well. That's an advantage because there's talented people here that support us as owners and that we trust to get to another level. So I know that they might not, because you're a busy guy, they might not get you, but you have an amazing team that could answer questions. What's the best way to for people to learn more, to have these frank and honest conversations with?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways. Many of our doctor partners, 600 now, we're in 39 states. Generally speaking, most dentists out there are probably going to know one of our partners.
Yeah.
If that's a known, if that's a public knowledge like you, reach out to one of our partners, ask them directly, and then one of our partners can get a doctor in touch with our team so we can further that conversation. If you just want to go through our website, we have a Start the Conversation form where a doctor can click through that, submit their information, and then we can engage in the conversation with my team on the other side of this wall here. And then lastly, we have some downloadable materials that I think are really good, informative materials that can help doctors get up to speed, before they really start engaging in a committed conversation.
And Jake's got some really cool videos, by the way. You got to check out his videos, especially when it talks about, all the terms that, look, I mean, we're dentists and we know, we understand like all the P&Ls in our practice, but there's other things like EBITDA and whatnot you might not understand. Jake's got some awesome videos there. But Jake, thank you so much, my friend. Guys, again, this was a long time coming. The last time I did a video with Jake, literally, I was holding a selfie stick and we're doing it in a smaller room, but MB2 has grown. I'll show some videos later of MB2 HQ. I'm happy. I'm Office 200, and here we are. People are saying, well, I'll wait a couple of years. Well, it's been more than a couple of years. I'm happy. But Jake, thank you so much. Guys, thanks for tuning in.